NBA draft fans, welcome back to Utility Sports. And in today's video, I am recording my version 3 of my 2022 NBA draft big board. And the last time I recorded one, my version 2 was right before March Madness. I recorded it March 2nd. This video is getting recorded April 12th. So, over 40 days have passed, including one of the most important stretches of college basketball, which is March Madness. So of course, there's going to be a ton of shakeup, a lot of moving pieces in this draft board, and it's going to be a really fun video. So hopefully you guys are enjoying the content here at Utility Sports. If you are, please let me know in the comment section, and then also leave a like on today's video and subscribe as well if you're new. Again, just a reminder here that less than 10% of our viewers are actually subscribed to the channel. So if you could just take 1 second and hit that subscribe button, it would be really beneficial and helpful to the channel. So let's go ahead and jump forward here now into my top 30-ish prospects as of April 12th, 2022. You'll understand why I put the 30-ish in there, because I actually have 31 ranked, and I also have an honorable mention. But before we get to that, let's start with this is a big board, not a mock draft. My ranking here is not where I think these players will get drafted on draft night. Just because I have a guy say 15th overall, it doesn't mean I think he'll be the 15th overall pick. In fact, you'll have to check my mock draft after this video, because I will be having another mock draft come out shortly. But then I also have other mock drafts up on the channel, and you can kind of see a range where I think these players will actually get drafted in comparison to where I rank them myself, because there is a vast difference between those two things. I rank certain players very high or very low, where in comparison to where I think they will get drafted. So, and I know I have to say this because I get comments every single time. Just because I have a guy ranked, say 8th, it doesn't mean I think he goes 8th overall. So I just want to make sure you guys are all aware of that. And I'm going to point everyone, if there's a comment about this, to this part of the video. Now let's move into my honorable mention, and that is Kentucky forward / guard Shaedon Sharpe. He's a 6'6" guard / forward. Came out of high school, did not play this year for Kentucky, of course, because he graduated from high school early, finished school early at the high school level, and then actually came into Kentucky, never played a game for them this year. He is draft eligible because he does have a late birthday this year, so he is eligible for the NBA draft, which is crazy. But every little rumor and speculation right now is pointing to him staying at Kentucky for a year. So if that's the case, obviously he would not come out in this draft. I still do think it's possible. And if he did, I'm going to let you know right now, he would be in my top 10 in this year's class. And it's a really strong class that shows how good of a prospect Shaedon Sharpe is potentially going to be. And I think maybe with a year of college, he could end up possibly being the number 2 overall pick next year. I think the number 1 overall pick next year is rather locked up for a guy named Victor Wembanyama. But we'll see here. Shaedon Sharpe, he's an interesting player. We'll talk more about him in future videos, but I do want to give him an honorable mention for anyone looking for him in today's video. I did not include him because of the rumors he's potentially staying at Kentucky. So let's get into 31. Like I said, I included 31 because I did want to touch on this player again, Patrick Baldwin out of Milwaukee. He's a freshman, played for the U19 USA World Cup team that ended up winning gold against France, against Victor Wembanyama's team. Of course, that was headlined by Chet Holmgren for the USA. And when you look at the strengths here for Baldwin, he does have some desirable traits. He actually went down 7 spots compared to my last big board. But I did want to include him on here because I think his shooting and length will be beneficial for certain teams. If you're looking for a wing who's 6'9", 6'10", and can shoot the 3-ball, Patrick Baldwin's going to be your guy. The only issue is he just doesn't do much else, especially when he's around other talent. This year for Milwaukee, he definitely did do a little bit more. But when you watched him on bigger stages around other talent, he was very raw in other areas. He's not very comfortable dribbling the basketball. It kind of looks like Reggie Bullock putting the ball on the deck. He's not very athletic in terms of his bend and his burst. I think he's a player who projects to be more of a 4 in the NBA. And he wasn't very assertive either. To be honest, that USA U19 World Cup team probably could have gone on without him. And I don't even know if anyone really would have noticed. He had played a very small role on that team. And that is a very talented squad. That team, had Jaden Ivey, Chet Holmgren, Kennedy Chandler. There was a lot of talent on that team, Adam Miller as well. But you look at Patrick Baldwin here, and for me, that's a big red flag. So for me, 31st here. And to be honest, he's trending more downward than up for me. So maybe we'll see him even fall lower. 30 now, Tari Eason, someone who is rising up my board, up 11 spots here. And this is one of those where I know a lot of people are going to say, whoa, Tari Eason 30th. yes, he's probably going to be a top 20 pick, very possibly a lottery pick. This is what I'm talking about, how my big board does not have to match where I think a player will go in the draft. His physical profile, his strength, and his finishing with the perceived upside that he could have will keep him in the top 20 of the NBA draft. But for me, I just draw myself to the lack of skill set that I think he has specifically on the perimeter. Right now, I think he's a 4 who kind of bullied a lot of guys in college because of his strength and physicality. And I think once he gets to the NBA, that play style just doesn't work as well. I think he's going to run into a little bit more problems at the NBA level because that strength and physicality doesn't play itself out well usually. And I think also his basketball IQ is somewhat questionable. I think he needs to grow as a passer. I think he needs to grow as a decision maker. And for me right now, Tari Eason, he's very, very raw. Now, if he gets to the right system, say San Antonio drafts him, maybe I'll be kind of hesitant about how I felt about him because, if he gets the right development track, he could end up being a very good player. And it goes to show how strong this class is too. I'm very confident that Tari Eason, at some point down the road, if the development track does go right, could be a starting level player. And I still have him 30th in this class. That's how good the draft class is in my estimation. Number 29 now, Jean Montero here plays for Overtime Elite and a very skilled point guard with really good playmaking feel, really good burst as well with the ball in his hands. And I think he's got every little quality that you'd want to have in a lead guard. Now, if you're talking about a lead guard here, I don't mean someone who's going to necessarily will your team to the playoffs, but someone who's going to get the offense running, get the offense in a flow, distribute for others, facilitate the offense, set up sets. And I think Jean Montero's got some upside for him in that area. But you see he's gone down 3 spots as well. And for me, I just think I'm looking more into the scoring input. How often is he going to score the ball at the NBA level? He's got decent size. He's not big. He's not small by any means. But looking at him, I think this skill set is rather lacking. I think he's going to be a player who needs to probably spend a year in the G League before he can really make an impact at the NBA level. And then you also look at his defensive impact. Again, not big, not small, but I don't think technically sound on the defensive end of the floor yet. So again, that's partially why I think he needs to spend a year in the G League. He needs to become more well-rounded to have a legitimate role in the NBA. Now, again, I do think there is some serious upside here. And part of the issue here as well for a player like Jean Montero is the Overtime Elite. I know it was a fun trial here and did get a lot of eyes from people. But at the same time, I don't know how seriously that league's going to be taken by executives and GMs. So I don't think I'm the only one with Jean Montero in the late 20s. I did consider him even lower potentially, but I think 29 here is a pretty good landing spot. 28, Julian Strawther. I've got him moving down 4 spots as well. So you can see there have been quite a few guys who have clearly moved up over some of these others. But Julian Strawther, this probably feels high to other people, especially if you're anyone who looks at other draft boards. I typically do not. I like to base it clearly off of what I'm seeing and then the statistics as well that back up my eye test. But here with what he does well, he plays off the ball very, very well offensively. It just always felt this year for Gonzaga that whenever they needed a bucket, he would cut down the lane for 2 points, or he'd catch an open corner 3 and knock it down. He just plays within himself, plays within a role, and he attacks closeouts well as well. So if you're looking at a player who is probably going to play along the baseline a lot in his career, probably be a corner shooter rather frequently, and I think there's a lot of upside here for that because I think he's going to play really well into that role, and he's going to be competitive on defense. Now, upside, very limited here. He's not going to be much of a self-creator. He is a sophomore for Gonzaga as well, so he's not like some young sprite chicken. He's kind of in the middle age for where this draft class is at in terms of youth versus experience. And also, I don't think he has a lot of self-creation element to him right now. I think, attacking closes most are probably going to get out of him the first couple of years of his career. And that's okay. I mean, he's an NBA-ready body who's going to defend. He's going to play within himself. And I do think that's a pretty good thing to ask for. And I think he's going to have a nice long career. It just comes down to the fact I don't really think he's going to ever be, a top-tier starter type player. 27, Isaiah Mobley, and he actually takes a big hit here as well. Moves down 8 spots. I still think I'm higher on this kid than most people probably are. And for me, the reasoning is pretty clear. You look at a near 7-footer who has really good shooting touch and then can also play make a little bit. That's a pretty intriguing blend. And he's, got fairly good length defensively. Now, I think he needs a lot of help defensively in terms of his technique and how he really positions himself. But overall, I think the upside here is pretty clear of a floor spacing big. Probably he's going to come off the bench most of his career, but it's not very often you find a guy who's 6'10" plus who can shoot the ball with regularity. He's a junior out of USC. He's a career 38% three-point shooter. So he's had a lot of volume. He's been very successful in that role. I think he'll transition very well to the NBA three-point line. He's got a very high release point. And again, that length and offensive fit. I mean, a pace and space big who has some playmaking feel. You can use him in the pick and roll, pick and pop with him as well. I think he's a smart player. I think he's a good player. And I think if the defense comes around a little bit more, this could be a really nice grab for a team because he'll probably go in the second round. 26 now, Trevor Keels, someone who has risen up my board. And I think the tournament was huge for Trevor Keels because he showed a little bit more of what I was hoping to see from him. His physicals, you look at his body right now, and it's clear to see this guy is NBA ready. He's very, very strong. He's going to be able to play around the rim. He's going to be able to play through, tight defense. He's going to be a tough defender in his own right. But the one thing that I really like to see from him this past March Madness was his aggression, specifically with attacking the rim. It gives him more of that offensive blend that I had projected for him as a player, because when he's aggressive and getting downhill and putting pressure on the rim, for me, I think that he's someone who fills kind of a lot of the needs. He's like Julian Strawther, but I think a little bit better, a little bit stronger, and a little bit more NBA ready, as well as someone with probably a little bit more upside. The only question for me, though, is how much upside does he have there? I don't think it's a ton because I don't ever see him being able to really, orchestrate an offense. I think he's going to be strictly an off-ball player for the majority of his career. And I think he's got to improve as a playmaker as well. I talked about his ability to put pressure on the rim. From there, it's got to be a little bit of progression for him, finding shooters on the outside or maybe, dive men. I think Mark Williams is a perfect example of this for Duke, where Mark Williams could catch pretty much any lob this year, it felt like. And I feel like Trevor Keels missed some opportunities to involve not only Mark Williams, but also those perimeter shooters around him. So I think if he grows in those areas, he could be a really nice pickup for a team. And I think he's going to go in the 20s. And that's going to be a really valuable grab for a team because I think he is ready to contribute. 25, Ousmane Dieng. He moves up 10 spots here up into the top 30. And he's a player who's going to continue rising here. I think a lot of people are starting to realize who this kid is. And he's a very intriguing player simply because of his size and playmaking feel. Kind of reminds you of what Josh Giddey brought from the NBL this past season, because Ousmane Dieng, very similar in terms of height and also playmaking feel. He throws the ball over the top of defenses. He's very good at using those passing angles, and he really likes to drive and kick. The things Trevor Keels was missing, Ousmane Dieng's best at. He's very, very good at drawing in defense off penetration and kicking the ball out to the perimeter. Now, for me, the other thing that I like about him is he plays with good pace. He puts the ball on the deck, tries to be aggressive and get downhill, and he's got some good upside because of that size and playmaking feel. But the question for me is, how does he really score the basketball, specifically in terms of his shooting? He only shot 27% from three this past year in the NBL, and then you're also looking at a lack of quickness here. I don't think he has the burst to consistently beat NBA-level defenders off the dribble with regularity. And if you're looking at someone who you want to be a primary ball handler, or at least a secondary ball handler for a team, you want him to have a pretty quick first step to be able to get downhill, beat guys off the dribble, manipulate the pick and roll a little bit easier. I think he's got to get a little bit better athletically, but he is young. So here with Ousmane Dieng, very possible we could see him take another massive step forward. And I think he is a player to watch near or even in the lottery potentially. I could see, Oklahoma City, Houston, they have picks at 15 and 16 more than likely, depending on the play-in results. And I think Ousmane Dieng very realistically could end up making a big jump here towards the draft. 24, Dyson Daniels, another player who rose up my board quite a bit. I know I got a lot of flack for it, and I think some of that flack was deserved. He's a player I'm starting to come around on a little bit more. Again, not as high as probably a lot of other people have him. They still see him as a lottery talent. I do not. He has some of the same flaws as Ousmane Dieng. I just don't see the way he scores the ball consistently, and his shooting touch from the perimeter is brutal. He shot 25% from three in the G League this past season. And you could look at that maybe favorably in comparison to Ousmane Dieng, who shot 27% in the NBL, because Dyson Daniels is improving as a shooter long-term from where he was at 2-3 years ago. But again, for the G League Ignite this past year, his shooting splits did go down by month. So first month in the G League, he shot 30% from three. Next month, he shot 22% from three. So for me, with Dyson Daniels, I think there's still a long road here for progression. But what you do have to like from him is his playmaking, specifically in the pick and roll. He's got good size to him as well. and he's going to be a flexible defender. He's going to be able to guard 1 through 3 probably right away in the NBA, which is one thing you do have to like about him, and specifically why he moves up above Ousmane Dieng for me is the defensive end of the floor. I do highly value that, and I think he's going to be a pretty solid defender at the NBA level. 23, Ron Harper Jr. He moves up 8 spots. He was actually in the he was in the honorable mention category last time for me, and I actually do have a prospect scouting video up on Ron Harper Jr. So if you're interested in a more in-depth look at Ron Harper Jr., that's a great video. I'll try to put a card for that in today's video. But when you look at his strengths, very flexible defensively. He's one of the few players in this class that you can have guard 1 through 4 because he's got the frame and physicality to deal with, bigger wings. But he's also very technically sound defensively. He moves his feet really well. He reaches with that outside foot to beat guys to their spots. And in that scouting profile, you'll see a clip of him beating Jaden Ivey actually to his spot. So, and that frame and strength, I think, is huge for him on the defensive end of the floor as well. And then offensively, he's actually got a pretty good skill set. He's able to score in the mid-range, able to score around the rim, pretty good three-point shooter. He's really progressed in his time at Rutgers from the three-point line. So for me here with Ron Harper Jr., I do like where he's at currently. He is a little bit older. He is the son of former NBA champion Ron Harper as well, so he knows how the NBA works. He's been around the NBA his whole life. But for me here with Ron Harper Jr., I'm going to have him higher than most people. A lot of people are looking at him solely as a second-round pick. I don't buy that. I think he should go in the 20s. And he kind of reminds me of Desmond Bane, who came out of TCU as a senior, was a little bit older, and then is now making waves in the NBA. I think Ron Harper Jr. is going to follow a very similar career path, even though I don't think his athleticism is quite what Bane's is. I don't think his three-point shot's quite what Bane's was. And again, I'm not sure what the projectable upside here is for him, but I see him as a long-term starter in the NBA. 22, Blake Wesley here. He's up 5 spots from my last mock draft. And for me, when you watch him, it's clear he's very confident in himself. And he's got really high upside and potential because of that, because he's very comfortable dribbling the basketball against pressure. And he likes to put a lot of pressure on the rim as well. So he's someone who can get downhill. He handles pressure well, and he likes to shoot off the dribble. So he's very confident in himself. Some evaluators might even look at that as a minus because sometimes he's too confident in himself. When you look at the decision-making aspect of it here, he's got to get better at, picking his time to shine. Now, for me with Blake Wesley, there's times where you watch him, you're like, wow, this kid's really special and really good. And then there's times where you watch him, it's like, dude, you got to move the ball. This is like the 3rd straight bad possession in a row. And now he was playing for a Notre Dame team that didn't have a ton of talent around him, really only one other good player on that squad. But for me with Blake Wesley, I think he's just got to get better as a playmaker, because ideally, if you're going to play with the ball in his hands, he's got to be able to involve others. And then also his range as a creator. I think he's got to find a little bit more three-point consistency, especially if he's going to be shooting off the dribble, because he's nowhere near, the top end players in today's league in terms of like Luka Doncic, James Harden. Wesley's not quite there with his scoring capability off the bounce yet from the perimeter. So I think he's going to have to grow a little bit, but overall, Blake Wesley, an intriguing prospect. Malaki Branham up a lot in my big board here, and he's one of the players who really rose a lot throughout March Madness, specifically right before March Madness, right after basically I recorded the last video, which was about a week and a half, 2 weeks before March Madness. I mean, Malaki Branham started turning in great performances consistently through the end of the season, and I know 21 is probably going to be low for where I have him in comparison to where other people view him. And I do like his physicality. I like his frame. I think he's going to be able to come into the NBA. And he's got a pretty solid game all around. He's going to be able to shoot the 3-ball well. And he's also got a pretty good mid-range jump shot. Finishes around the rim fairly well. And he's versatile defensively. So you might be wondering, why do I have him only at 21? And for me, when you look at a guard or wing like Malaki Branham, again, I just want him to be quicker. For the same reason that I don't have Ron Harper Jr. higher. And I think Ron Harper Jr. is just an all-around better player than Branham right now. Branham, lacks some of the same upside in terms of his quickness. I don't think he's quick enough to be a consistently dangerous perimeter threat, especially when it comes to attacking the rim. I think he's going to have to, function more off of catches and rotations and taking advantage of open lanes rather than, creating those lanes for himself. So again, that's a little bit of a knock on his long-term upside. I do think he's a good player though. And again, this just shows how strong this class is. I think Branham's a very good player. and I have him 21st overall. I think this is going to be the best draft class I've ever evaluated. And that says a lot because, I started evaluating before the Luka Doncic draft class, and that class is special as well in terms of, Trae Young, Luka Doncic, Jaren Jackson Jr., DeAndre Ayton, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. That class is really good, but I think this class from like 1 to 30 is insanely talented. So there's a lot of really good players in this class. Maybe not the top end guy like a Luka Doncic, but there's going to be some really, really good talent in this class for sure. 20, you got Kendall Brown here, and he actually moves down 8 spots. And people might be wondering why I'm selling my stock here on Kendall Brown. And it's not that I'm selling my stock. It's just that my preference has changed from him to certain other guys ahead of him because of some of the flaws he has in his game. What I think he's going to be really good at is being an offensive connector. He's going to play within that role. And I think that's a key thing here. When I feel like I keep saying that, and you guys might be thinking, well, he always says that. That's important. If you're trying to build a team, think about like from a GM perspective or, certain perspectives of this is what we need. We need to add this to fit. And I think the Derek White trade to Boston this year is a really good indicator as to why that's important. Derek White became the connector in their offense, and everything started, really sailing smoothly after they got him. And I think Kendall Brown can have a similar impact here. If you already have a couple shot creators, you don't need to add 2 more shot creators. That's way too many cooks in the kitchen. Brown, probably not the shot creator ever at any point in his career. I just don't see it. But he's got really good length, athleticism. He's going to be very well-rounded. He's going to play solid defensively. He's going to be a good gap defender, I think, is really the MO for him. I think his length is going to be fairly bothersome for opponents, especially in passing lanes and around the rim as a weak side rim protector. But again, for me then at the same time, he doesn't really do much with the ball in his hands. Earlier I had hopes that he could maybe be like a Joe Ingles type. I just don't know if I really see that for him. I think, again, he's a player who's going to hit the gaps and score and facilitate for others off of rotations rather than being a guy who can, probably run a pick and roll consistently for a second unit. And then again, also the on-ball defensive upside. Again, I think he's a good gap defender, and we didn't really get to see a ton of him being the on-ball defender because another player on his team took more of the defensive responsibility as a freshman. Nikola Jovic, he goes down 2 spots, and I keep comparing him to Kendall Brown because I think these two players are very similar in the way that they're going to, play in the NBA. But I think Nikola Jovic is just a little bit better than Kendall Brown because I think he's got a little bit more skill set in his back pocket, specifically when it comes to playing with the basketball. I think he's a much better playmaker than Kendall Brown. And I think he's someone who could probably reliably run a second unit if you wanted him to. I think he kind of fits more of that Joe Ingles archetype that I was looking for with Kendall Brown, and I see it a little bit more with Nikola Jovic. I think his shooting consistency needs to come along a little bit more for him to be a very good offensive piece. But right now, I think you see a lot of the same characteristics here between Jovic and Kendall Brown, and I think Jovic just a little bit further along in his skill set, but I think athletically not quite as gifted as Kendall Brown. So I could see a team preferring Brown over Jovic, but I could also see a team preferring Jovic over Brown dependent on what they're looking for. If you're trying to win right now, I think Jovic probably a slightly better selection. And if you're trying to, maybe look at a longer term approach, I think Kendall Brown does make a lot of sense as well. 18, Ochai Agbaji, he's up a lot as well. And for people saying, whoa, you had him low, I did. And part of the issue here is this is going to be the 3rd time I've evaluated him, because he did declare for the last 2 drafts as well and then end up withdrawing his name both times. And for me, he just screams Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. I just can't unsee it. I just think he is KCP 2.0, which isn't a bad thing. KCP's had a really good career. He's made a ton of money in his career. And I think Ochai Agbaji is going to follow the same thing. The issue with him, though, is he's just going to be an off-ball offensive player who's going to be a pretty solid defender. I don't think he's ever going to be a great defender. I don't think he's ever going to be all defense. And I don't ever think he's going to be a 15 to 20 point per game scorer. I think he probably averages like 11 points a game for his career, which is good. He's going to be very NBA ready. He's going to fit out a system. And I think a lot of teams are going to be better by adding him. I don't want to make it sound like I think Ochai Agbaji is not a good player, because I do think he's a good player. I just don't really know what the upside here is for him. He's an older prospect who's come out multiple times for the draft, ended up withdrawing his name both times because he wasn't going to be a 1st-round pick as a younger player. And then you look at him now, he got to the peak of the NCAA tournament, winning the national championship for the Kansas Jayhawks. I'm really happy for him. But at the same time, realistically, as a draft evaluator, potential matters, especially when you look at teams drafting in the lottery. I could see Ochai Agbaji going in the lottery for sure, especially with the teams that have picks this year. If the Pelicans end up getting that Lakers pick, that makes a lot of sense to me. I rule that out. But Ochai Agbaji here for me, I have him 18th in this class. 17, TyTy Washington, a guard who really impressed me, especially earlier in the season for Kentucky. And then, of course, St. Peter's kind of got in their way, and I think did stall out some of that momentum that Washington maybe could have gained throughout the NCAA tournament. But also that is a red flag to, lose to St. Peter's the way that they did. First game of the tournament specifically, because you lose a lot of that, narrative that would have come along with it. But TyTy Washington, the film is good. I do have him sliding 6 spots here because I think the 3-point shooting concern I had last time I recorded this video as well, I think that did play itself out a little bit. And I do think I'm kind of coming around on how much of a concern that maybe is. But I do think he's a very good playmaker who you can put in the pick and roll. Maybe he's best coming off the bench early in his career and then trying to develop that 3-point shot a little bit more. And the thing is, I'm very confident he can, because he's a very good mid-range scorer, very confident in that area, and he can be a pick and roll initiator for a team. But then also you have the questions about, can he be the head of a defense? I don't think so. And then that 3-point shot just quite frankly isn't there as of right now. So again, you have to do a little bit of projection with it. Will it get there? Will it not? And for that reason, I bump him down a little bit below another point guard in Kennedy Chandler, who I think really helped his stock in March Madness. Of course, they lost to Michigan. That was a tough loss for Kennedy Chandler, but that was his coming out game. And that game was essential for his draft stock. I think that any talent evaluator, if they're trying to sell a scout or a GM on Kennedy Chandler, they will pull out the film from that game. He's a pesky defender. He's going to be able to guard 94 feet. He's a little undersized, but he's very quick. And the biggest thing here is, I was always projecting his playmaking capability for others, but that was always dependent on his willingness to get downhill and get to the rim, something he quite frankly just didn't do with enough regularity for me to be in love with him. He's up 6 spots from 22 because I think he finally found that switch for him where he's like, I can beat anyone I want off the dribble. I am quick enough to get to the rim whenever I want to. And the fact that he can do that, I think is huge. Now, he does have some limitations because of his size. I don't think he's going to be the best scorer at the NBA level, but I think he's going to put enough pressure on the rim that he has value in today's league, specifically with all the shooting around him. So I think for me, you got to find more consistency in him getting to the rim. I hope he continues that. I hope that last game against Michigan's a good sign for him doing that into the future. But I do really like Kennedy Chandler as an overall prospect. Moving on now to 15 here, I got Mark Williams. And at this spot, I'm looking at a center here who moved up again a ton of spots for me, specifically because, in March Madness, Duke played so well. And I think Mark Williams was such an essential reason as to why. And for me, center's the hardest position to evaluate. At times, you look at a player who, Kofi Cockburn, for example, is just physically better than everyone he's playing. And Mark Williams, to a certain extent, is as well. So it's hard to really quantify how valuable a center could be because of their size and strength. But I think Mark Williams kind of showed himself in terms of his positioning, IQ, physicals, and he's going to be a perfect rim-to-rim center. And by that, I mean he's going to protect the rim on one end, and he's going to rim run on the other end. And he's going to play within himself. He's going to play within a really, desirable role for a lot of teams. Any team that likes to run pick and roll, which is a majority of NBA teams at this point, they need a pick and roll big like Mark Williams. So I think that he's really worked himself up boards. I could see him even being a lottery pick. Now, for me, he's got to get better as an offensive player, specifically with his back to the basket. I don't even know if he's going to punish a ton of switches yet at this point because he doesn't really have a consistent right hook, left hook, anything like that. I think he's got to get a little bit better with his back to the basket. And I think his outside skill set's got to come along as well. I think it's just rather lacking at this point. Doesn't really shoot the ball from the perimeter. But for me, Mark Williams, he is an intriguing prospect because of his ability to play from rim to rim. 14, EJ Liddell. He actually does not move up or down in this big board video. And I think for him, it's pretty clear what he's going to do great at the NBA level. And that's going to be a positionless defender who's going to guard maybe 2 through 5. I could see that happening. He's a little bit undersized to play the 5, but we've seen other players do it in the past, like Draymond Green. And I think EJ Liddell has similar characteristics. This past year for the Buckeyes, averaged 3 blocks a game. A very good shot blocker. He's also got a pretty good mid-range jump shot. I think he can translate it out to the 3-point line. The biggest thing for him is going to be a mindset thing. I think he's got to, switch his mindset up from, hey, I'm the guy here at Ohio State. I was averaging 20 plus points a game. I'm one of the best players in the nation, to having to go play within a role on a team. The team's going to ask him to be an effort defender, which he definitely was that at Ohio State. but he's going to have to keep that effort up even if he's not getting offensive touches. And I'm not really concerned about that, but I do think there is a little bit of an adjustment here for him that he's going to have to do that. And then also he is a junior, so he's a little bit older, limited upside here for me. I don't really know what he's going to do off the dribble. He's probably exclusively going to play the 4 or maybe 5 offensively. I don't see any way that he could ever play the 3 position. So for me, Liddell, not a lot of offensive upside, but I think a very good defensive player. 13, talking about really good defensive players, Jeremy Sochan, who's moved up my board 3 more spots, and I think I was higher on him than most people in my previous video before March Madness, but I think we really, got to see why he's such an intriguing, valuable player. He is arguably the best defensive player in this class, especially with his length and mobility. He's got good size to him. He's got a good frame. He's going to play physically. And a lot of times, Scott Drew there for Baylor, their head coach, asked him to guard the center. And then when he would do that, he would actually win those matchups. Played really, really well. Was very comfortable trying to front, 3-quarter front. He could also play behind and disrupt him with his length at the rim as a rim protector. He's also got enough length and mobility where he's going to be able to go out in the perimeter. He's one of the few players that I've ever evaluated that I could say comfortably, this guy's going to be able to guard 1 through 5. I really do believe that. And then for me, a team that would make a lot of sense for him would be like the Houston Rockets, who badly need to get better defensively. Jeremy Sochan, a very intriguing prospect because of his defensive upside here. And he also knows what to do with the basketball once he rebounds it. He can push the tempo for you. If you want to try and get more transition baskets, I think Jeremy Sochan does make a lot of sense. Now for me, offensively, what does he do when he doesn't have the ball? Because that's where it gets a little, funkier. For me, if you're looking for a player who doesn't have as much offensive skill set, which is where Sochan's currently at right now, doesn't shoot the 3-ball well, and offensively, if he's not getting layups, he's probably not scoring. So with consistency, that is, he's going to knock down a few open threes. But for me, he's got to come along offensively. He's got a long ways to go, but his defensive upside is so immense that I think you can be patient and wait for that offense to come around. 12, Walker Kessler here, the National Defensive Player of the Year. And for me, I think Sochan's a more intriguing defensive player at the NBA level because of how switchable he's going to be. But Walker Kessler's got some serious upside to him as well. A player that I'd like to compare him to is Jakob Poeltl, because I think they got similar length, disruption ability around the rim. And Walker Kessler was the best shot blocker in the nation this past year. He's very willing to play within himself as well offensively. He's going to take a lot of dunks. And the one thing I do like from him, I know I have offensive versatility listed as an area to improve. He did start shooting some threes this year for Auburn. Now, he didn't knock them down at a high clip, didn't have a great shooting season, but he was willing to take them. And I think that if there's some progression here from the end of the season for Auburn to where, he'll be at by the time of the draft, he could be a sneaky good offensive pickup for a team, because if he is able to knock down that 3-ball with any regularity, he could be a scary grab. Again, I don't know where he's at. I think the combine will be huge for him. If he does showcase some of that shooting touch that he's hopefully progressed, that could be really, really good. He did go up 1 spot here for me just because of a little bit of shakeup and where certain guys are at with Kendall Brown moving down. But, Walker Kessler, I do feel really good about. I think rim protection is one of the most important elements when you're building a team defense, and he's going to be really good in that regard. 11, Hugo Besson down 1 spot here, but very high in comparison to where other people probably have him. And I do have a scouting profile video of him as well. So if you are interested in learning more about Hugo Besson specifically, with really good in-depth footage and film, and exactly what I see from him, there is a video up on our channel of him. But for my strengths with him, he's going to be one of the best shooters in this class, if not the best shooter in this class, in terms of a pure shooter standpoint. He's going to be able to run off screens. You're going to use him in flares, pin downs, horns actions. He's also very capable as a creator himself. He's got playmaking upside. He's really grown in that area. The French-born point guard, he's more of a combo guard here now in the NBL. And I could see him playing a little bit of combo guard in the NBA too, where he, maybe some offensive sets, he put the ball in his hands. He's very capable off the dribble to score for himself, though, and I think he is coming around as a playmaker for others. And the issue for me, there's 2 things defensively here. First of all, he's 6'5", so he's not small, but he's a little light. He's, pretty slim. And then the other thing here, defensively, his technique is brutal. He's what we call a hopper defensively, where, he's going to toe tap his feet pretty much every defensive slide instead of reaching with his outside foot like I talked about with Harper Jr. If Hugo Besson goes to a team that really knows how to develop players defensively, coach them up, and really instill what good defense looks like, I think he could be a massive steal in this draft because I probably see him going anywhere from pick, 13, 14-ish back into the lottery to about 20 to 25. There's a pretty wide range where I could see him go just because right now the league does have quite a bit of shooting, and also with where the NBA is at. Oklahoma City has multiple picks. Houston has multiple picks. Those teams probably not looking for guards. San Antonio as well in that range. So Hugo Besson might fall simply because he's a guard, and there's a lot of teams right now that have draft picks in that range that aren't looking for guards. But Hugo Besson, I think, a really good pickup for whoever grabs him. Moving on to the top 10, or right before the top 10, I'm going to recommend a very top tier product that I think you guys should pick up, and it's the Manscaped Performance Package 4.0. It is the perfect package. If you use code utility20, you can get 20% off plus free shipping on all of Manscaped products. Specifically, the Performance Package 4.0, I highly recommend. They shipped it out to us for free, and I absolutely have loved the product ever since I received it. The Lawnmower 4.0 picture on the right of your screen is equipped with an LED light that makes it very nice and easy to clean up the hedges, take care of business. I know my girlfriend loves it. I love it as well, simply because of how full it is. It's also waterproof, so you can bring it in the shower with you. And then the weed whacker on the left there as well comes in this, along with a bunch of other items as well, and necessities that I would include in my hygiene routine now moving forward. But the weed whacker, very good as well for dealing with any unwanted hair in other places as well. So again, Manscaped, thank you so much for sponsoring today's video. And I do think it is a really good product. I hope to see you guys pick it up as well. Remember, use code utility20 to get 20% off plus free shipping at manscaped.com. It's time to throw out your old hygiene habits and upgrade your life today with the Performance Package 4.0. Moving on to Jaden Hardy, who I have at number 10, and he's moved down one spot here. And some of you might be pausing the video to comment right now. Hold on a second. I know Jaden Hardy, I have him high. I don't care what his season looked like for G League Ignite. Go compare his G League Ignite numbers to Jalen Green's G League Ignite numbers, and you might have a little bit of a rude awakening for yourself when it comes to efficiency concerns and all that. This kid's got it off the bounce, okay? He can knock a ton of difficult jump shots. He's very confident in himself again. He's kind of got that Blake Wesley confidence, but he did it at a higher level against pro athletes. I think he's an improving playmaker. He does need to get better as a decision maker. He leaves his feet too often. The player he actually reminds me of from a physical standpoint and kind of a decision-making standpoint is Donovan Mitchell, right when Donovan Mitchell came out of Louisville. The two of these guys are very, very similar with the way that they move, the type of shots they can hit, and the way that they pass the basketball coming into the NBA draft. But I think there is some of that serious potential here where maybe the long-term ceiling is something like a Donovan Mitchell. Now, I don't think he's going to get there, but for me, the floor is probably around like a Jordan Clarkson, Donovan Mitchell's teammate there for the Utah Jazz, where Jaden Hardy could be a really good bench scorer for a team where, efficiency for bench scorers usually isn't as high as it is for stars. And I think Jaden Hardy probably falls into that role, but there is some upside here that I would consider him as a top 10 selection, specifically because if you're looking at this, realistically, would you rather take Jeremy Sochan or Jaden Hardy, especially if you're in need of any scoring punch, which let's be honest about it, a bunch of the teams that are picking top 10 need scoring punch. So for me, Jaden Hardy, I do think he makes a lot of sense. I think his upside could be way higher than certain other guys in this class. The fact that certain experts, I'm going to use that very loosely because I do not think they're experts at all, are putting him outside the top 20, sometimes even outside the top 25 in drafts. That is ludicrous to me. That is ridiculous to me. And Jaden Hardy is much, much better than the 25th best player in this year's class. That's cut and dry simple. If you've watched Jaden Hardy, you know that. So for me, Jaden Hardy, very good player, and a player who I think, there's very low floor here, but also very high ceiling. Number 9, Keegan Murray. He's up 6 spots as well. This is a player who just continues to impress me every time I watch him. And he's what I like to call an opportunistic scorer. He's a filler 4. He's going to do all the dirty work. He's going to hit the offensive glass well. He's very comfortable playing without the basketball. I think that was one of the biggest things that stood out to me from watching Iowa this year is, with him averaging 22 points a game, going into watching them, you'd think, oh, well, he's going to get the ball pretty much every possession, or they're going to find ways to post him up, or he's going to run a lot of pick and rolls, either as the roll man or as the ball handler. And really none of that happens. He's just kind of like in certain spots within their motion offense, catches the ball, scores, catches the ball, scores. oh, shot goes up, he's there to rebound it, scores. Like, he just plays so efficiently. And I think pretty much every NBA team is going to crave a guy like this because, again, I've talked about playing within a role. Keegan Murray does it, but at an exceptional level. It's not like he's just opportunistic. He's even better than opportunistic. He's nearly perfect in opportunistic moments, it feels like. I think he's got to get a little bit more consistent from the three-point line, though, at the NBA level specifically. And I think he's got to become a little bit better of a passer. With him not really being the hub of an offense, there's a lot of times where, we haven't really got to see him as a playmaker too much. So I think he's capable long-term. I think there's going to be some development here for him. He is only a sophomore, so I do think there's a lot of upside still. But again, I think you're getting a very polished package in other areas as well. So really good selection here for whoever grabs Keegan Murray. Johnny Davis, he falls down 2 spots here. He's my number 8 player in this class as of right now. And for me, obviously the way the tournament ended was not pretty for Johnny Davis, but he's the type of player that is susceptible to those kind of things based off his play style. Shot creators, they are bound to have bad shooting nights from time to time because the degree of difficulty is so incredibly high, specifically when they're shooting with a hand in their face in the mid-range area. And I think he is a very strong all-around player. He gets to the rim well. I think he's going to shoot the 3-ball pretty decent. That's really where you have to see a little bit more improvement, though, for what's going to make him either really good or just solid in the NBA. If he can really shoot the 3-ball well in the NBA, even in the mid-30s is all I need from him for percentage. That makes him a really scary player, specifically if he can knock it down and catch and shoot scenarios. But for me here with him, the way the season ended, I think a lot of people are overreacting to it. I see some people saying he's not a top 10 pick anymore. I'm not sure where that's coming from. I think he's a lock to be a top 10 pick still. And for me with Johnny Davis, I do have him fall down a couple spots just because, the other players I have ahead of him, I think are just more trending upward than where I had Johnny Davis. He's not really trending upward now at this point. And it's going to come down to how teams view his upside. He's another combo guard here where he's probably best with the ball in his hands, but if you have a lead point guard already, do you take Johnny Davis? Do you not? And that does complicate things. Teams like Portland, Sacramento, even Indiana now to a certain extent with Duarte and Halliburton, are they looking for a player like Johnny Davis? Maybe not. So perhaps that's why he falls a little bit in some mock drafts, but here Johnny Davis 8th in my big board ranking currently. 7, AJ Griffin actually does not move up any spots because I had someone move ahead of him and Johnny Davis fell behind him. But for me, son of Adrian Griffin, who also played in the NBA, played for the Dallas Mavericks for a little bit, as well as some other teams. And AJ Griffin's an intriguing player. He's, again, been around the NBA his entire life, but he's got an NBA skill set. He's going to shoot the ball very well, nearly 50% on catch and shoot threes this year, and high 40% overall on all 3-point attempts. So if you're talking about a guy who you want to add 3-point shooting, Sacramento, I'm looking at you here. If you want to add 3-point shooting, AJ Griffin, really good option here. He's also got really good size and length. He fares similarly to a DeAndre Hunter or Patrick Williams, both guys who went 4th overall in their own respective classes. And then AJ Griffin, I have him 7th here, but I think, skill set wise, he's right there with those guys, which goes to show how strong this class is. The fact that he's probably going to go, maybe 6, 7, or 8 in this class in comparison to where those guys went 4th overall. So his athletic upside potential, I think he's got to get a little bit better when it comes to ball handling. I think his handle's a little loose right now. He does show a pretty good escape dribble. He's very comfortable using that. And I think he's got to assert himself. He's got to get to the rim a little bit more. I talked about it with Trevor Keels. Keels really got, accustomed to doing that. I think AJ Griffin needs to find a little bit of that aggression as well, but a very intriguing prospect and one that I am really excited to watch in the NBA. Moving on to 6, Jalen Duren here. And again, maybe this is one that's a little surprising to people that I have him up to 6, specifically with how his season ended against Gonzaga. Didn't quite have the best matchup. Chet Holmgren had a few blocks on him, but there was the one spine-chilling dunk that he had on top of Holmgren's limp body after a flopping warning was called. But for me here with Duren, the strengths are so clear, and I'm going to say it now. If you wanted to clone Bam Adebayo, you'd probably end up with something like Jalen Duren. He is very, very switchable. He's got a phenomenal physical profile. He's not the tallest guy, but he's going to be very, very assertive with his athleticism. He's very quick laterally. He's got a good second jump. He can protect the rim. He's going to run the floor well as well. I think he's going to be a really nice player in the pick and roll, specifically if you go high pick and roll with the 3-point shooter there on your team. If you have a really good shooting guard, a guard who shoots the basketball well, Duren's going to be that guy's best friend because he's going to free him up on some screens, but also if they have a high hedge or switch, Duren, if you hit him in the high post area on a short roll, he's got the playmaking field to either hit to a corner, maybe even back to a opposite side wing, or to a dunker spot lob. He's got very good playmaking feel. Some of the passes he threw this year, I was kind of in shock, honestly, because I did not think when he came into Memphis that he would have that type of capability. He did show some upside there. And I think, a year or two into his career, he's going to be a really nice passer, similar to what we see from Bam Adebayo. Now, unlike Bam Adebayo, he doesn't quite have the back to the basket game where Adebayo is currently at. Now, Adebayo is not the best back to the basket big in the league by any stretch, but I think he's way more polished than Duren is currently. And then I think Duren's also got to, evolve his game as a shooter a little bit just to match today's modern NBA. But we've seen multiple times before that, NBA bigs, a few years into their career, start shooting the ball a little bit more, get a little bit more confidence, find a little bit of consistency in a jump shot. And, Duren, I think if he does, he becomes a massive steal 6 overall. It's very possible this guy could be, a top 3 player from this class. I really do believe that, just given his physical frame and how switchable today's NBA has to be, specifically come playoff time. Jalen Duren might become a massive plus on the defensive end of the floor. So I really, really do like him. 5, Bennedict Mathurin, a player I've been high on all draft process long. Anyone who's been here on the channel knows I've had him 5 literally all season. I saw the top 4, I saw Mathurin, and I saw the rest, and I said Mathurin's clearly 5. He's not with those top 4 quite. He's close, but not quite there. And I don't think anyone else is quite with him in that 5 spot. So for me, he's a very good 3-and-D wing, specifically with his skill set offensively. He's got some ball handling creation upside. He's kind of a blend here to me of Mikal Bridges with his athleticism, but also his offensive capabilities of Tim Hardaway Jr. Those have been the guys I've been kind of comparing him and likening him to all year long. And he's got really good athleticism. I mean, I've been saying that for quite some time. Of course, he had the big poster dunk in the tournament that everyone got to see, luckily. And, Bennedict Mathurin finally started getting the love he deserved. But I've been very high on Mathurin all year. He's shown that athleticism playing all season. For Arizona, he's been a fun player to watch. Now, for me, watching him, there's a few things that I'm not in love with, even though I do love him as an overall prospect. His off-ball desire to cut is rather lacking. He kind of gets caught in the MO of, hey, I'm going to stand around until I touch the ball. Once I touch the ball, the possession starts for me. And realistically with Mathurin, I think he's kind of a combo player at the NBA level where half the time he might have the ball, half the time he might not. I think he's skilled enough where a team's going to want him to have it in his hands. But I also think realistically, you're probably not going to win an NBA championship ever if Mathurin's your best player. So if you're looking at it that way, he's got to be a little bit more willing to cut and, really take advantage of that athletic profile that he has as a cutter off the basketball, because for Arizona, there was just times where he would just stand around. And then also for me, I think right now he's really going to be a great gap defender. And I think there's the on-ball defensive potential here for him. I think he's got to get, a little bit more technique and a little bit more coaching into him to become a really, really good defender. But I do think that upside is there. 4, Paolo Banchero. I have him 4th, did not move him. I did move him. I moved him up to 3 for a little bit, moved him back down to 4 because I think some of those same holes just are evidently there. He's a mid-range assassin with a sneaky handle. He can put you to sleep and then knock down a jumper right in your face. He's got a nice skill set. There's no denying that. And 6'10", it's rare to see a player with this skill set. And if it's any other class, he might be the 1st or 2nd overall pick. But this year, for me, I don't see him being a top 3 prospect in this class. I like his physicality. I think he's a pretty solid interior defender. I think he's got to get better defensively on the perimeter, though. And then the other thing for me here with him, you'll have to evaluate his quickness and is he going to stop the ball too much? Because if his efficiency is not in the high 40s and he's stopping the ball with regularity, I do think it could hurt what a team's chemistry could potentially be and how, deadly an offense could be if he's going to sit there and take, 6-7 seconds off the shot clock every time he catches the ball. Those are my biggest concerns for him. Overall, Banchero is a very good player. I don't want to make it sound like I'm, ragging on him either, because again, like in most classes, maybe 1st or 2nd overall pick discussion. But this class, I think he's probably clearly cut himself out to number 4. Number 3, I've got Jabari Smith. And now this is where we're going to start ruffling feathers, I'm sure, because Jabari Smith has a ton of fans, and I understand why. He's a very good prospect. very good perimeter and weak side defender. He's going to be able to block shots at the rim. He's got really great length. He's going to be also a really good shooter with good scoring input. He finishes at the rim well. Around contact, I think he's got to get a little bit stronger to finish around NBA contact a little bit more, but he's a very smooth jump shooter. But for me, the dimensionality here is a big aspect that I'm talking about, because if you compare him to even a Paolo Banchero, Banchero is clearly the more skilled ball handler and self-creator at this point. And Jabari Smith has some, room to grow in that area, which is fine. I think his defense outweighs that weakness in comparison to Banchero, which is why I have Jabari over Banchero, because I do think that defense is a huge aspect, specifically with how versatile I think he'll be defensively. I could see him guarding, shooting guards in the NBA, or I could see him guarding fours. So Jabari Smith, very flexible defensively, and I do like his offensive, skill set. I just think he has a little bit of room to grow before, with where he's currently at, before he becomes a, number one option for an offense. Number two, I have Chet Holmgren, who's never going to be a number one option for an offense. And you might be wondering, how do I have Chet Holmgren over Banchero and Jabari Smith if I think both of them could potentially be number one options for an offense, whereas Chet Holmgren, I don't think will ever be that. And it's because this is maybe the most special defensive player I've ever evaluated. He's got phenomenal timing. I talked about Jeremy Sochan, how phenomenal defensively Sochan is, and he really is. But Holmgren has a different element in terms of the verticality he can defend with. Any shot around the rim, Holmgren's going to get to it. It is remarkable, his timing. Even when he's way behind a play, he's not out of it. He is going to get a ton of chase down blocks in his career. Get used to seeing him pin it on the glass. He's got defensive versatility. He can switch out on the perimeter if you want him to. There's also a lot of times this year where Gonzaga's head coach Mark Few used him in a way that he was going to be the drop defender. And not only could he tag the guard attacking him, but he could recover back to the big in a matter of a second. And when he would recover, not only would he recover and contest the shot, he would block it. And that is incredible and just something I've not really ever seen before, honestly. So for me, Chet Holmgren, the defensive upside is immense. And I think, he's going to be a really good connector. He's got to get a little bit stronger, up to probably 220 pounds or so is where I think he's going to be best at the NBA level. And that is a long way to go. He has to put on about 25 pounds of weight, which is not, it is easier said than done. It's not something that you can just do overnight. But for me, Chet Holmgren here, the skill set, he shot 39% from three. He's got really good playmaking feel. I mean, he is a very special player with really no weaknesses other than, is he a go-to scorer and is he strong enough to play the center all the time? That's really the two weaknesses. And otherwise, skill set wise, he's one of the more skilled players I've ever evaluated. Number one, Jaden Ivey. My number one player in the class. He's been so for a while. And this might be, a hot take to people, but I've had this pretty much the last 3 months or so. And I remember it was crazy. People thought I was crazy when I first said it. And then I think the tournament kind of opened people's eyes to it. His game is perfect for today's NBA. The NBA style is a pick and roll point guard who can get downhill, kick out to others, willing passer, but can also do it himself. He's got really good speed and quickness. He's also really improved as a finisher, specifically in terms of a finesse finisher. So when you look at what he was as a freshman for Purdue, he still had that athleticism. He could punch it home, but where he's really grown is, his capability of coming to two-step jump stops and hop steps and euros and finishing around contact instead of finishing through contact solely, because he's really improved in that area. He's got a lot more patience to his game, way better pace that he plays with. He's able to use his quickness explosively because he's also able to slow himself down, which is a very tough thing to do when you're that fast of a player. He's Ja Morant 2.0, not quite the playmaker Ja Morant was. And I'm not sure if Ivey's going to get to Morant's level, but I think he's as close of a thing as we maybe will ever see. So if that's all even in the realm of possibility for the comparison, I think he's worth the number one overall pick. I said it back when Ja Morant was in the same class as Zion. I would have taken Ja Morant 1. I think that's played out fairly well, and I think Jaden Ivey here as well should be the number one overall pick. We'll see exactly, though. I don't think he necessarily will be. I could see a team still taking Chet 1. I could see Jabari Smith go 1. And at this point, Jaden Ivey, it really depends on who locks up that first overall selection. But for me, I think his shooting consistency, people are going to point to that. And I do think that, he should improve a little bit. But the one thing about him is he does shoot a ton of deep threes already. So, a lot of his 3-pointers came from 27-ish feet. And that's, very deep. So to be shooting in the mid 30s for percent from three, that is a really good sign. I think just, he had some off nights where, 0 for 4, 0 for 6. That does definitely hurt your efficiency if you're going to have nights where you just don't knock down a triple. So I do think he's got to get a little bit more consistent, but overall, my favorite player in the class, and I think the best player in the class overall. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure to hit that like button. Also subscribe to the channel. Just thank you again so much for watching. Ask me your questions in the comments section. I will be responding to the comments, specifically asking about, certain players. So let me know in the comment section. Again, thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.